Hi, I'm Loretta, and I'm really glad that you showed up today. Welcome to my sewing room.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I am going to piece the log cabin blocks for the Eldon quilt. So this is the second in this series of videos, and hopefully you can see this. I have all of my strips and the centers pre-cut. The pattern will give you all the sizes for these. I believe the strips are 1 inch wide and various lengths, and I've got mine all laid out in the order that I'm going to stitch each round. So I've got my light round first, a medium round, another light, my dark, another light, and my final medium round. So I'm going to go ahead and get started sewing, and we'll see how quickly these come together. Okay, here we are at the machine, and I have my machine threaded with a neutral thread. I have my stitch length set at 1.9, and I am still waiting on my dealer to get the part in to fix my dual feed feature. So instead of sewing with my 37D 1/4 inch foot, I have a 20C foot on, and I posted a video last week, I believe it was, about how to set up your machine for a 1/4 inch stitch if you do not have a 1/4 inch foot or prefer not to use one. So without the dual feed, I prefer not to use the 1/4 inch foot because I don't get full contact with the feed dogs. So now we're just going to start sewing here. I've put my little leader scrap in there and position my fabric pieces right sides together, raw edges aligned, and put the edge of the fabric right at the edge of the foot there. And I am going to piece these one at a time. I'm just going to go through one here in the video so you can see how to fully assemble one of these log cabin squares. But normally I would just chain piece all 8 of them together. So I've finished sewing this first seam. I'm going to press this off to the side over here and grab piece number 2. Piece my log cabins in a clockwise rotation. I don't suppose it really matters. That just sort of makes sense to me to piece them clockwise. And you'll see I start and end with a scrap of fabric. If I were chain piecing, my next piece would just feed in there, but you'll always get a better beginning if you start with a scrap of fabric that you've sewed a short length on. Next we'll do the first round of a medium color. Just match up all those raw edges. And now another strip of the same fabric. Now we're on to the next light colored round. The second piece of this light colored round. Next is the dark. I don't worry too much about thread color when I'm piecing. I like to pick something neutral. I usually go with a gray or a ivory, a beige. If I'm stitching a really dark quilt where all the colors are dark, I'll go with a darker gray or a darker cream or tan color. But I don't try to match my thread to the quilt colors necessarily. Not for piecing anyway. Quilting the quilt, that's another matter. Now we're on to the final light colored round. This is the last light colored strip. And you can see I've got a tiny bit of fabric sticking out over here. My seam allowance is more of a scant 1/4 inch, but I do have these pieces, these strips cut to the exact length I need. And this block will get squared up at the end. We'll trim it with a template. And this final round is a medium fabric. And this is the final round of this log cabin block. So there is one completed log cabin block, and I'm going to piece the other 7. I'm going to chain piece those, and then we will, when I'm done with those, we'll trim these up and with the template so that they're exactly the size they need to be, and we'll mark all the corners with a dot so we can do those Y seams when that part comes. So I will get back to you when I get these pieced, and then we'll start trimming. See you in a bit. Okay, here we are again. I'm almost done piecing these log cabin blocks, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things. If you are having trouble with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, I notice that this happens when you don't have a dual feed feature or a walking foot. And what can happen is at the end of the seam you can tend to veer off to the right, and your seam ends up being smaller down here at the end than it is up here at the beginning and farther back in the block. So a couple things in order to avoid that. As you approach the end of the seam, You might notice the fabric wrinkle a little bit down here. If you let that pressure off, my Bernina has a hover feature. When I stop sewing, the foot hovers above the fabric. If you don't have that kind of a feature, you can just lift your presser foot, but that will take the pressure off and help even these out. Another thing too is to use a stiletto or something like that, even a bamboo skewer or seam ripper, or even this little pair of tweezer type scissors works great. Just hold these two pieces of fabric together, and that will also help keep them feeding straight and evenly. Here's my last strip. All right, now I'm going to get these all pressed completely, and then we'll trim them up and mark those corners with the template. Okay, now we're at the ironing board. I just want to talk a little bit about pressing. Each one of these rounds that you add, and you'll press after each set of strips is sewn on, you want to press everything out. The proper way to press is to first set your seam, pressing it in the same manner it was sewn, and then you want to lift this piece up, and I gently slide my iron over that piece to press it out. That will prevent you getting a little pleat here. If you gently slide your iron in the direction you want that seam to go, it'll prevent pleating in here. Okay, so I have these all pressed now. I am going to switch to my rotating cutting mat. Okay, so here I have my square template. I'm going to just put it on the back side of one of these log cabin blocks. You can see there's not much to trim there. If you're doing much more than just a little bit of sliver trimming, your seam allowances may be a little bit off, or possibly your cutting might be off. So see, there's not much left there to trim off. I'm going to mark all four corners. And again, on this template, I have just a square of like a clingy vinyl, and that helps keep the template from slipping around on the fabric. Okay, we'll finish trimming all of these, and be back, and I'll show you all the completed pieces and what these look like with the star that I made in the last video. The Y seaming will be in a separate video. That will be the next installment. Okay, there's the star that we made in the last video, and these are the log cabin blocks that will fit into all of these point areas. And there we go. So the next time I will do the Y seaming to insert all of these log cabins, and we'll have basically a finished block for Eldon. The setting pieces again are diamonds like this shape, and they'll fit in this area right here as we continue on once we get the blocks pieced. So there you go, and I am loving how this is looking, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. Until next time.